So, what's a business for? I mean, what's its fundamental reason for existing? For a long, long time, economists had this one super clear answer. And today, we're going to tear that model apart and see what it's really made of. All right, think about it for a sec. If every single business out there is aiming for one big bullseye, what is it? For a long time, the answer seemed almost too simple. Yeah, see, according to the classical economists, there was no debate. The answer was crystal clear. They basically said the entire reason a company even exists can be boiled down to one single, powerful goal. And there it is, profit maximization. That's the whole game. The idea is that every decision a company makes, who to hire, what price to set, how many widgets to make, it's all pointed in one direction, making that profit number as huge as possible. It was like the ultimate North Star for business. And you know what made this theory so appealing? It was just so simple, so elegant. The economists were able to take this massive idea and distill it down into one little formula that cuts right to the chase. And here it is. Pi equals TR minus TC. Now, I know it looks basic, but don't let that fool you. This tiny equation, it's the engine that drives the whole theory. Okay, so let's unpack that real quick. P stands for your total profit. TR is total revenue. That's all the cash coming in the door from sales. And TC is total cost. Yep, every single cent you spend to keep the lights on. So profit is just what's left in the pot after you pay all your bills. Pretty straightforward, right? But, okay, knowing the formula is one thing. The real puzzle, the million-dollar question, is figuring out the exact amount to produce to make that profit number, that little pi symbol, as big as it can possibly get. And to solve that, economists develop two main strategies for finding that perfect sweet spot. You can think of them as two different ways of looking at the problem. The first one is the big picture approach, the total revenue, total cost method. The second one zooms way in, down to the nitty-gritty. It's the next item decision, asking a much more specific question. All right, so this graph shows that big picture approach perfectly. See the bottom line? That's how much you're producing. Your goal is to find that magic spot, labeled QE right there, where the gap between your revenue line, that's TR, and your cost line, TC, is the absolute biggest it can be. That big chunk of space in between, that's pi max, your maximum possible profit. Okay, now let's switch gears to that second method. This one is way more granular, more in the moment. It asks a really practical question. If I make just one more of these things, will I actually make any money on it? This is what they call the marginal approach, and it's all about that very next decision you make. And this approach has two really strict rules. Rule number one, you look at your marginal revenue, that's the extra cash you get from selling one more unit, and your marginal cost, the extra cost to make that one more unit. You keep making them as long as the revenue is higher than the cost. The sweet spot, the signal to stop, is where they become exactly equal. And rule two is kind of like a safety check, just to make sure you're actually maximizing profit and not accidentally maximizing your losses. And this graph, this shows that exact moment of truth. You see, a company just keeps chugging along, producing more and more as long as each new item is profitable. But then it hits point E. That's the stop sign. That's where the cost to make one more perfectly matches the money it brings in. If you dare to produce even one more item past that point, you're officially losing money on every single one. So on paper, it's a beautiful, clean, logical theory. But here's the big question. Is this really how companies operate out there in the messy real world? Is your local coffee shop owner or the CEO of a giant tech firm actually pulling out these graphs to make decisions? Well, spoiler alert, not so much. Turns out, when you try to apply this perfectly elegant model to the chaos of real business, some pretty big cracks start to show. Okay, problem number one. The model assumes the person who owns the company is the same person running it. But just think about any big corporation today. You've got shareholders who own the place, and they want profit, like yesterday. But then you have the CEO and the managers who are actually running the show. Maybe their goal is long-term growth, or crushing the competition to grab market share, or just hitting sales targets. Those goals can totally clash. Another huge issue, this whole model lives in a fantasy land where you know everything and there are no surprises. But we all know real business is the complete opposite. It's all about navigating risk, dealing with uncertainty, stuff this model just pretends doesn't exist. Plus, it's like a snapshot in time. It tells you the perfect move for right now, but it's terrible at dealing with how things change over the long run. Oh, and the list goes on. The model totally ignores something called the time value of money, which is just a fancy way of saying a dollar in your pocket today is worth more than a promise of a dollar next year. It also treats every company like it's living on an island all by itself. That just doesn't work for explaining how, say, the smartphone market works, right? Where the moves of a couple of giants, like Apple and Samsung, basically shape the entire battlefield for everyone else.
So after all that, what are we supposed to think? Is this whole model just wrong? Well, no, not exactly. It's more about understanding its proper place, what it's actually good for.
Here's the key takeaway. The profit maximization model isn't a perfect photograph of reality. It was never meant to be. A better way to think about it is as a foundational blueprint. It describes the fundamental force, kind of like an economic gravity, that's always pulling on a business. Even when a company has other goals like social good or market dominance, that pressure to be profitable is always there in the background. And that leaves us with a really big, fascinating question for today. If just chasing profits is a flawed map for the modern world, then what's the compass? What are today's businesses really following? Now that is the billion-dollar question, isn't it?